the system or habits or your identities, right? But Mark shows that when spiritual authority actually shows up, it doesn't just heal individuals, it freaking rearranges environments. The town wasn't afraid of the possessed man, guys. They were afraid of the power that freed him. Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds. I am your host, Bennett Tanton, and this is Sunday Spiritual Sitrep, where we slow down, look the weird stuff in the eyes, and ask the question most people dodge. What if the Bible isn't just telling a moral story, but showing you an actual battlefield? Because in Mark, Jesus doesn't ease into his ministry with warm speeches and gentle vibes. He walks into the synagogue and the atmosphere changes. The unclean spirits react like someone just kicked open the door they thought was locked. And the people watching don't just say, wow, that was inspiring. They say, what is this? Like they can feel it. That's what we're digging into today. The Exorcist Messiah in the Gospel of Mark. And I want to make this practical, not spooky for clicks. Lately, people are starting to notice that the world feels louder, more pressured, more emotionally volatile. Right now, even folks who never talk about spiritual warfare are using language like something's in the air or it feels heavy. And this week, it's like everybody's carrying an invisible backpack they just didn't pack themselves. So here's the question. What if Mark is giving you a lens to look at that through? Not a conspiracy corkboard or wall art stuff, right? We've all seen those. Not everything is a demon. Just a brutally clear picture of authority. Mark shows Jesus confronting demon possession and unclean spirits with the kind of calm you only have when you own the room. No rituals or negotiations, no drawn out drama. You just command the room. And the spirits respond like they're under legal order. Right? Which raises a bigger thought that we're going to keep nudging forward this entire episode. If the unseen realm reacted that strongly to Jesus then, what does that imply about the unseen realm now? If you read Mark honestly, the demons don't doubt Jesus 1 ounce. They don't debate theology. They don't need proof. They recognize authority instantly. That should mess with you a little bit because it suggests the spiritual world is not symbolic. It's organized. So with that, quick house rules. If you get value from this episode, take 2 seconds to like, share, and review the podcast. That's how... that's not influencer talk. It's how the show really does grow. And it's how more people who are quietly wrestling with these issues and these topics find a place to think out loud. One more thing. Send this to a friend who keeps saying, I don't know why, but something feels off lately. I say that again. I don't know why, but something feels off lately. Send it to them. Also, if you're a researcher or a creator or an investigator or someone who with firsthand experience around deliverance, spiritual warfare, or the paranormal edge of Bible texts, I'm open to collaboration. Not hype, not noise, real actual work with real receipts. real conversation. All right. On this Sunday Spiritual Sitrep, we're going to walk through Mark like it's a field report. We'll track patterns, escalation, and why this gospel moves so fast. It almost feels breathless because Mark doesn't end scenes neatly. It just opens doors. Section 1, recognition before revelation. And Mark doesn't waste time setting the mood. I mean, no genealogy, no poetic birth narrative, no soft entry point. He opens with straight up confrontation. Jesus steps into a synagogue, and before anyone can decide how they feel about him, something else reacts first. An unclean spirit, loud and disruptive and totally public. It doesn't whisper doubts. It doesn't wait to see how the crowd responds. It recognizes him. It recognizes Jesus. That's the first thing that should make you pause when you're reading the Gospel of Mark. The demons don't need Jesus to explain who he is. They don't ask questions. They don't hedge. They identify him instantly, and they're terrified. What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? That's not a metaphor in language, folks. That's not mincing words. That's legal language. That's a hostile force recognizing jurisdiction, period. The people in the synagogue don't know who Jesus is yet, but the demons, they sure do. And let that sink in. The unseen realm identifies authority faster than humans do. This sets the tone for the entire Gospel of Mark. It isn't asking, who is Jesus? He's showing you who reacts to him first. And it's not Rome. It sure as hell isn't the Pharisees. It's the spiritual underlayer. The spiritual underlayer that most people pretend isn't there. Here's what's unsettling about this. Jesus doesn't hype the moment. He doesn't shout. He doesn't perform some sort of ritual or cast spells. He doesn't call down angels or recite incantations. He simply commands silence and orders the spirit out. And it obeys. Not quietly, of course. It convulses the man. It screams. It resists just long enough for everyone watching to understand that this isn't symbolic. Authority isn't gentle when it displaces an occupier. Mark uses this pattern again and again. The unclean spirits react violently, not because Jesus is some cruel person, but because his presence actually destabilizes a hierarchy that was functioning just fine before he showed up. But these entities had access. They had space. They actually had influence, and suddenly they don't. Jesus doesn't negotiate with demons in Mark. He doesn't negotiate with demons anywhere. That alone should challenge a lot of modern assumptions about spiritual power. Now, zoom out for a second. Mark is writing in a world saturated with spiritual explanations, and you're full of Roman gods and household spirits and regional deities. The idea of unseen forces is not controversial like it is today. What was controversial was someone walking in and exercising uncontested authority over them. That's why the crowd reaction does matter. They don't say, that was kind. They say, what is this? A new teaching with authority. Authority is the key word here, folks. Not compassion, not charisma, authority. And here's the nudge forward. If Mark is intentionally front-loading exorcism, what is he preparing the reader for? Because this isn't an isolated miracle story. It's the opening shot in a campaign. I mean, one that escalates, one that moves from synagogues to the wilderness, to storms, to regions known for spiritual defilement. One where demons begin to speak more urgently as Jesus gets closer to Jerusalem. And if demons panic this early in Mark, what do they know is coming that the disciples don't know yet? This matters right now because people are quietly revisiting these texts with fresh eyes. And lately, there's a growing discomfort with watered down spiritual language. And people are starting to notice patterns of oppression, compulsion, and psychological pressures that don't respond to therapy speak alone. Okay? Mark doesn't deny the physical or the mental, but he adds a whole nother layer, and we need to as well. And once you see that layer, the gospel stops feeling ancient. It starts feeling uncomfortably current in this day and age. Section 2, when the battlefield goes public. So if Section 1 shows authority being recognized, Section 2 shows what happens when that authority starts moving around. Because Jesus doesn't stay in safe, contained religious spaces. He goes outside and everything escalates. And Mark is intentional here. Once Jesus leaves the synagogue, the confrontations stop being quiet, local, or I guess what you could say is manageable. They become public and it gets chaotic, impossible to ignore. And this is where the Exorcist Messiah in the Gospel of Mark stops feeling like a teaching role and starts feeling like a destabilizing force. Let's talk about the storm, okay? Jesus and the disciples are crossing the sea when a violent storm hits. I mean, we're not talking about some kind of drizzle, not a bad night. A storm-seasoned fishermen are genuinely afraid of. And notice the pattern? Nature behaves the same way the demons do earlier. It resists, it rages, and it threatens to overwhelm until Jesus speaks. Peace, be still. And the storm doesn't gradually calm down, it just shuts off. Jesus speaks to the storm the same way he speaks to demons. Same tone, same authority, same immediate obedience. That should make you feel uncomfortable in a productive way, because Mark isn't separating spiritual authority from physical reality. He's merging them together. And the implication is simple, but it's super heavy. Whatever authority Jesus has over unclean spirits, he also has over creation itself. And the disciples, they're more afraid after the miracle than before it. That's an underrated detail here, everybody. Fear doesn't always come from danger. Sometimes it comes from realizing you're standing next to power you don't fully understand. We definitely don't. Now, Mark pushes the narrative further. They land in a region of the Gerasenes. I'm probably saying that absolutely incorrectly, but it's Gerasenes. Gerasenes. This is not Jewish territory anymore. This is spiritually unclean ground by first century standards, okay? You've got tombs and pigs, isolation, a man so overtaken by something that chains can't hold him. Society has written him off, and he lives among the dead. And again, recognition happens instantly. The man runs toward Jesus, but the voice speaking through him, it's not his. It knows exactly who Jesus is, and it begs, and it negotiates. It tries to control the terms of engagement. It's Legion. That name alone tells you this isn't a single entity problem. This is an occupation, and Legion isn't poetry. That's military language again, folks. Mark wants you to hear it that way. Jesus doesn't panic. He doesn't escalate emotionally. He allows the spirit to leave, but not to stay. And when they do, the region feels the impact immediately. Thousands of pigs rush into the sea. The local economy takes a hit. The townspeople don't celebrate liberation. They ask Jesus to leave. That's important, folks. That's important. Authority disrupts comfort. Mark is quietly showing you that people can prefer oppression they understand over freedom that costs them something. The man is restored. He is clothed. He's calm. He wants to follow Jesus. But the region, they want distance. That dynamic hasn't changed much. Right now, people are open to spiritual conversations as long as they don't challenge the system or habits or your identities, right? But Mark shows that when spiritual authority actually shows up, it doesn't just heal individuals, it freaking rearranges environments. The town wasn't afraid of the possessed man, guys. They were afraid of the power that freed him. Here's another nudge forward. Mark is stacking evidence. Demons recognize him. Nature obeys him. Territories react to him. And every time the response isn't just awe, it's fear and resistance and withdrawal, which raises the next question you just can't dodge or step out of the way of. If Jesus had this kind of authority, why does the conflict intensify the closer he gets to Jerusalem? Because the next layer isn't just about demons reacting. It's about systems. Section 3, when authority threatens the system. Now, up to this point, the conflict has been obvious, right? Demons, they panic and storms obey, and a possessed man gets free, and an entire region feels exposed. But now Mark tightens the lens even more. Because when Jesus keeps moving, the resistance changes shape. The demons were loud, nature was violent, but religious systems, they're quiet, they're calculated and surgical. And in Mark, that's where the tension sharpens really fast. And here's what Mark does brilliantly. He shows that the deeper Jesus goes, the less the conflict looks supernatural on the surface, even though it still is underneath. The unclean spirits scream, and the religious leaders, they don't. They watch, they track, and then they accuse. And notice what they accuse him of. It's not blasphemy at first. They accuse him of authority. Who does he think he is to forgive sins? Who does he heal on the Sabbath? Or why does he heal on the Sabbath? By what power does he cast out demons? The last one matters, folks. By what power does he cast out demons? because the religious leaders don't deny the exorcisms. They don't say that didn't happen. They say he's doing it by the wrong source. The Pharisees never denied Jesus's power. They argue about where his power comes from. That should immediately tell you this isn't a debate about miracles. It's a threat assessment. Jesus responds with something that still rattles cages today. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. In other words, collapse doesn't come from internal authority. It comes from outside disruption. And then he drops the line Mark wants you to sit with. No one enters a strong man's house and plunders his goods unless he first binds the strong man. I mean, that's not parable fluff. That's operational language, military language, right? Jesus is saying plainly that what people are witnessing isn't random compassion. It's targeted dismantling. That's what it is. A hostile structure is being restrained so something else can be reclaimed. And Jesus doesn't describe his work as rescue first. He describes it as an invasion. And now the religious leaders have a problem. Because if Jesus is right, then their authority isn't neutral. It's freaking compromised. And systems that benefit from spiritual blindness rarely welcome clarity. This is where Mark subtly shows you that spiritual warfare doesn't always look like screaming demons. Sometimes it looks like policy or doctrine or social pressure or even reputation destruction, getting canceled or whatever. Jesus heals and they plot. Jesus frees people and they question his legitimacy. And then Jesus restores life. And they start watching him die in slow motion. And here's the part that feels uncomfortably modern today. Right now, people are starting to notice that power doesn't always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it wears credentials. Sometimes it hides behind order. And sometimes it tells you freedom is dangerous and compliance. Oh, smart people. That's wisdom. Mark doesn't tell you to distrust structure. He doesn't. He shows you what happens when structure feels threatened by authority that it can't control. In Mark, demons scream when they lose control. Religious systems stay calm and they plan. That's the nudge forward from this, because the closer Jesus gets to Jerusalem, the more the conflict shifts from unseen reacting to him to institutions moving against him. And if you're paying attention, you realize something very sobering. The crucifixion isn't a surprise. It's an escalation. And the question Mark is quietly forcing you to wrestle with is this. If Jesus exposed spiritual authority structures back then, what happens when that same authority shows up right now? Section 4, silence before the strike. Now, something strange happens as Mark moves towards the crucifixion. The demons stop talking. Early on, they're screaming, and they identify Jesus publicly. They beg, they plead, they try to negotiate, they resist. But as Jesus approaches Jerusalem, the unclean realm just goes crickets, quiet. And that silence should bother you more than the shouting ever did. Because silence isn't surrender, man. It's strategy. Mark shows us a shift. The chaos gives way to actual calculation, and the spiritual conflict doesn't disappear. It goes underground, and the crowd grows volatile. The religious leadership tightens its grip, and Rome looms in the background like a loaded weapon that doesn't need to fire yet. And Jesus knows exactly where this is going. And he predicts his death repeatedly with absolute calm, without panic. That alone tells you something critical. This isn't a tragedy that he just stumbled into. This is a confrontation he's walking towards with absolute full awareness. And that reframes everything that came before it. The exorcisms and the healings, the storm, the strong man language. None of it was random. It was preparation. The demons scream when Jesus shows up. They go quiet when they realize how far he's willing to go. And now, watch how Mark frames the crowd. The same people who were amazed by authority are suddenly shouting for blood. Not because Jesus lost power, but because power exposed something they didn't want to see. And the system does what systems do when threatened. It redirects fear. Barabbas goes free. Jesus gets the cross. And here's where Mark's portrayal of the Exorcist Messiah in the Gospel of Mark reaches its most unsettling point. On the cross, the exorcist looks defeated. The storm calmer is silent, and the demons aren't shrieking. The crowd thinks the threat is neutralized. But Mark gives you one final clue that something else is happening. The veil tears. This is not poetic symbolism, folks. That's access language. Separation removed. Barriers have been breached. The unseen infrastructure is being altered at the exact moment it looks like Jesus was lost. And when Jesus stops casting out demons, the spiritual architecture itself straight up starts to break. And then comes the line that flips the entire freaking narrative. A Roman centurion, oh my gosh, centurion, someone trained in authority, hierarchy, and lots of violence, looks at the crucified Jesus and says, truly, this man was the Son of God. Not a disciple, not some priest, not a just random theologian, an enforcer of empire. Mark is telling you that recognition still happens just later, and often from unexpected places. The unseen realm knew immediately humanity needed the cross. This matters right now because people are wrestling with silence. And lately, a lot of folks feel like the noise has just dropped, but the pressure hasn't. And prayers feel unanswered, and the chaos isn't obvious. The conflict feels internal. I mean, structural. It feels heavy sometimes here, folks, big time, at least for me. And Mark would say that doesn't mean the battle ended. It means it moved to a much deeper layer. And in Mark, silence doesn't mean defeat. It means the final phase has begun. And then that's where we'll just close this out. Okay. Not with answers tied in a bow, but with momentum. Because the resurrection doesn't undo the conflict. It confirms who had the authority the entire time. And that's Jesus. Authority that didn't end at the cross. And here's where Mark leaves you on purpose, not with closure, with tension. Because the Gospel of Mark doesn't end like a victory parade. It ends with an empty tomb, shaken witnesses, and fear mixed with just absolute awe. No long explanations, no neat theology bowed up and ready for you. Just the implication that what Jesus started didn't stop when Rome thought it was finished. That's the part people miss. The Exorcist Messiah in the Gospel of Mark wasn't just casting demons out of individuals. He was exposing a layered system. You have spiritual, you have cultural, and you have political, and you have religious. And when that system pushed back, it didn't mean he lost. It meant the threat was real enough to require escalation. And if you zoom out, Mark reads less like an ancient biography and more like a sitrep. Authority enters the field. The unseen reacts. Nature obeys. Institutions resist. Silence falls. And then the infrastructure itself, it just cracks. And right now, people are starting to notice similar patterns. Lately, there's a quiet sense that things aren't just off. They're contested. Power feels centralized. Speech feels monitored. Pressure feels psychological instead of physical. And more people are asking spiritual questions without knowing how to phrase them. And Mark doesn't give you panic. He gives you orientation. And if Jesus was an exorcist before the cross, what exactly does the cross finish? That's the doorway I'm going to leave you in, standing on this Sunday Spiritual Sitrep. Not fear, not certainty, but discernment. And if this episode stirred something in you, do me a favor, like, share, and leave a review. That's how this show survives the algorithm, man. And finds the people quietly asking the same questions that you are. Send this episode to a friend who keeps saying, I don't know why, but it feels like something bigger's happening. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that in a day, man, I'd be rich. Again, if you're a researcher, a theologian, investigator, creator, or someone working at the edges of this space and biblical studies and deliverance and spiritual warfare, please reach out. Broadcasting Seeds isn't about hype. It's about mapping the territory honestly. Next week, we'll be back with another Sunday Spiritual Sitrep, because this conversation doesn't end clean. It moves. I also want to leave today with a prayer. There's a pretty bad storm going on, and let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus. We ask for your mercy over every community in the path of this storm. Bring protection to families, strength to first responders, and peace to those who feel afraid today and tonight. Lord, calm what can be calmed, restrain what can be restrained, and guide people to safety. Let your presence be near to the vulnerable, the isolated, and the suffering. We trust you even in the wind and the dark skies. Cover this nation with your grace and let your will be done. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Be safe out there, everybody. Take care.
He stepped into the room and the air got heavy. No thunder yet, but the darkness was ready. Crowds were watching, hearts unsure, but the spirits knew what to walk through the door. Chains don't hold when the king arrives. The shadows shake just to stay alive. on command, and the night turns white, and you can feel it. Something shifts when heaven speaks, the prison revs. Demons knew him first, before the crowds believed. They screamed his name and fell to their knees. Storms went silent, sickness fled the scene. Mark didn't write a story, he wrote a war in real time. Yeah, demons knew him first. Out on the sea where the waves were rising, men were praying but fear was driving. He stood up calm, no panic in his eyes, spoke two words and the storm complied. Then he walked where the dead men stay, tears in ruin, unclean terrain. Legs unbared, don't send us down. Even hell knew who wore the crown. No negotiation, no delay, authority clears the way. Demons knew him first, before the crowds believed. They shrieked in terror and couldn't breathe. Chains broke open, darkness lost its grip. Mark didn't write a fable, he wrote an invasion script. Yeah, demons knew him first. And then the silence as Jerusalem closed in. No screaming spirits, just the system's grin. But the veil tore, the earth groaned, the unseen cracked when the king took the throne. And the cross wasn't defeat, it was the strong